some of the things that I've noticed to do with Pluto, particularly because today the moon made a pass on Pluto. And so the moon is basically said to highlight everything that it touches, kind of like a guitar pick plucking a string, right? And from what I've noticed from readings, is that it does, even though Pluto isn't a visible object in the sky, it does seem to have that same effect, that like moon proximity to these outer planets is going to be a significant factor. And with that in mind, I was sort of noticing some of these kind of Pluto themes coming up, and I thought I would share a little bit about that. Namely, well, I'll just get right into it. Is that like Pluto has something to do with power, right? Um, and I think when you factor in the kind of thing about, like, there's something about Pluto in manipulation and like using people, and it's kind of like pulling the strings kind of thing. Like, it's like if you like have the right connections of like people in power and somebody can do you a favor or something like that, or if you kind of like, maybe if you're kind of like disenfranchised in other ways, but you think you have a way you can kind of like get one over on the situation to like kind of get what you want and stuff like that. um, One of the thing I was thinking about this, and I'm not, I'm not like a philosophy student. I'm kind of like, yeah, I've got a Sagittarius stellium though, and I feel like I have a natural kind of inclination to be interested in philosophy, and so I'm not. Take it for what it is, basically. Like, I'm an armchair philosopher. I haven't been to university or anything, but one of the things that I thought was kind of like applicable to keep in mind, anyways, with a Pluto retrograde, or with Pluto being the topic of focus, is the ideas of Kant. And Kant had this whole thing about against the idea of using people as a means to an end. And I kind of looked this up. Apparently, it was called Kant's Formula of Humanity. And I kind of wrote out a couple quotes here. Um, so here's one, anyways. So act that you treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the persons of any other, always at the same time as an end, never merely as a means. And I mean, to sort of clarify what he means by that, is that like each human being is kind of like a totality within themselves, right? Like, it's kind of funny because like I've been noticing, like I've been doing these clubhouse groups, and I'm noticing that like when people are they're having something to say, and when they're done speaking, I'm noticing there's this thing where people say I'm complete, which is to me, I don't, to be honest, I find it like a little bit cheesy. Like, it sounds like, I don't know if it's like a new age kind of thing, but like it's like, I mean, I guess that's sort of saying like it sounds better than like, okay, I'm finished, or like I'm done, or like it's almost like maybe like one of those radio signals, like 10-4, over and out, But people be say like, okay, I'm complete, right? And it's like, but that's like, it's kind of like that thing is that each person is kind of like, if you consider what a person is like, each person has their own, desires, their own dreams, their own history, their own principles, their own, like each person is a fully fledged human into themselves. And basically it's like the idea is that like by manipulating people, it's like using people as a means to an end, that like we don't consider the person's whole entirety and whole integrity as a human being, but rather we kind of treat people as these disposable objects. Like, oh, I can just use this person to get what I want, and it's like I can kind of manipulate them and make something convenient for me, but we don't take into full consideration how that might be affecting the people that we're doing that to. And to kind of further, I found another quote here, where Kant gives a definition of what he means as like using someone as a means to an end. and that's as a mere instrument or tool, someone whose well-being and moral claims we ignore, and whom we would treat in whatever ways would best achieve our aims. So it's like basically what I was saying, like people are, it'd be treating people as being disposable, people whose own well-being, their own what they want. It's like it's when we're so selfish that we're so concerned about what we want, what makes us happy, what our own personal gratification or our own ladder climbing is, that we don't consider that the other people may have their own desires, their own preferences, and we basically just walk over them to try to get what we want, right? And one of the things about like a retrograde is like the force of Pluto, which is already kind of about this thing about having power and control and maybe manipulating and using these kind of underhanded tactics. It's like the thing about a retrograde motion is that it's sort of like it's going in the other direction than what it's used to, and there's a sense that the force of that planet is now something that is like it's said to become stronger, for one thing, because it's becoming closer to the Earth, right? It's the distance is physically closer when the planet is retrograde. Now, if somebody is more up on the astronomy, like I have to admit that my understanding is where it's at in terms of the actual astronomy. I'm assuming that this applies to planets like Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, as well as the classical 7 planets. But if there's some sort of exception to the rule in terms of astrophysics, I'm open to being corrected. You can leave a comment or whatever. But that's part of what the meaning of a retrograde comes from, is that a planet is closer to the Earth and it's said to be acting its force out in a way that's stronger, but in a way that may also be, maybe even a little bit less, like a little bit more unconscious. Like Pluto itself is already a planet that we associate with the unconscious, but when it's retrograde, it might be even more of like the force of Pluto is acting on us or acting through us, and we may be even more unconscious of that force, and we may be giving into this stuff about these kind of not so great, force and control and power and all this kind of stuff. I was thinking about some other kinds of things about Pluto. Mainly that the whole thing about Pluto is being, that thing about the underworld and what is hidden, what is dark, what is secret, and there's something about, and also the connection to corruption. And one of the strategies that is popular when it comes to people who are really corrupt is this whole thing of admit nothing, deny everything, basically, right? Where it's like if there's something that that you did wrong, or that is like, you're trying to avoid being found out, it's like you don't admit anything that would like at all incriminate you, and you can just deny everything straight up, and you just are completely like, that's not real, that's not true, like I wasn't there, I didn't talk to, it's like, and I mean, I don't even want to bring Donald Trump up, but that's one thing that I've heard people, kind of associate with his style of dealing with a lot of things, is this basically like, it's kind of funny because I'm thinking of like a categorical denial, right? Whereas with Kant, it was kind of like the categorical imperative, right? I think of like, I don't know. I'm just thinking like, maybe that's not really that good of a point, but it seems like a kind of similarity of this categorically just denying everything, keeping everything secret, just so you can retain that kind of grip of power and control. And you know what's funny, man? I mean, it's kind of funny. I'm thinking, man, like, who am I talking to? Who are you that's watching this video, anyways? What is my audience? I'm just recording this right now, so we'll find out. That's another maybe Pluto thing, like the hidden quality of who is it that I'm even talking to right now. I had I remember when I was a teenager, there's a couple guys that I was friends with, and these were kind of like some weird characters, like guys who'd be in like the alternate program, kind of a little bit like misfit kind of guys, um, but they're like kind of like a little bit like troublemakers, I guess, as would be a lot of kids that would kind of end up in those kind of alternate program situations, and so like there's this I there's a specific memory where like we went I was hanging out with them, and I think we were probably like playing like Halo video game on the Xbox or something like that, and they wanted to go to the corner store to get some snacks and stuff like that, and like one of the this guy is like it is typical kind of like troublemaker kind of thing. He's just like, like rather like maybe instead of just like getting like a flat of pop, like pop cans, like maybe what I could do is I could like open up one box of pop cans and then open up another and kind of mix them up and create my own variety pack, and then like I could like take it and then like buy it and then take, and it's like, so he's like doing this, he's like instead of he's not stealing, right, but he's like opening up the boxes, and he's like switching the pop cans around, and he takes it up to the counter, and like the guy is just like, what the fuck are you doing? It's like the guy obviously could tell he was fucking around, right? And he's just like you can't do that. And so this guy, he's like what? I don't know what you're talking about, man. I found him like this, like you know what I mean? It's just, like that's the whole like, and that's what I kind of learned there, is that some people's strategy for like getting away with things is like this thing of like either acting like you could just act completely dumb, like I don't know, man. I just found it. I think it was already open, and like I didn't know. I didn't do it. It's like that, just being like a complete idiot about it, and like just trying to like, like if you get caught for something, just no, it wasn't me. I didn't know. I didn't. Well, somebody, maybe it was somebody else. Like. And that's like this like complete denial that of like just completely avoiding the problem. And I mean, like it kind of goes with the Pluto thing, because it's like keeping whatever it is that's the secret as the secret, whatever that's taboo or like dirty or that you don't want to admit to, like even if it's just the most like, it seems like the most desperate kind of attempt at denial, like that's kind of what that kind of goes with the Pluto archetype anyways. And then, like, I think that also brings me to another point. I mean, oh man, Pluto is kind of a dark one, but like, I was reading a James Hillman book. This is the kind of thing, if you notice my background is changing, because let's just say I'm in the middle of moving right now, and I'm kind of like, sometimes I'm in one place, and I'm actually just hanging out at my mom's house because I was bringing some stuff back here to make my move a bit easier and stuff like that, kind of downsizing a little bit. So, what was I going to say? I don't have my James Hillman books with me, but there is one of his books called Dream in the Underworld, which I think is appropriate, with Pluto being the god of the underworld. And there was an idea in Dream in the Underworld about how you have to cross the river Styx to get to the underworld, to get to Hades. And that one of the things that the river Styx stood for or represented was actually a kind of hatred, which were like, and that's kind of like, if you think about the Hades as death, as representing, death, like dying and going to the other side, and we have such an ingrained aversion to like our basic life drive is wired to be averse to death, to do everything we can to stop it, and that's why there's so much. So it's also fear, right? It could be like the fear of death, but also just this whole like, I think there's that poem which is like, fight the dying of the light, do not, what is it, do not go quiet into the night, that kind of thing, like that. It's like really well, I mean, it could just be this strong aversion, but there's this thing that Pluto brings out these things which that there can be. It can be like xenophobia, it can be racism, it can be like the differences of opinion, even be like the conflict. One person's on one side, one person's on the other, and that there's something that comes up in those divisions which can be like a bitter kind of hatred. And I mean, classically you could talk about that as a Saturn archetype as well, because Saturn is like represents nemesis. It's connected to the opposition. It's this difference between the self and the other and stuff like that. So it's not really just a Pluto thing, but that's like another one to watch out for with Pluto retrograde, because this is I mean, those forces are already there, but with if you bring in the meaning of a retrograde, that stuff could just be amplified in a way that there's some sort of unconscious force that is there where our aversions are just kind of amped up. And if you look at the depictions of like the underworld in, let's say, film, and like it's often things which are like, there's things that we associate with the underworld that is like grotesque or like disgusting, or like that just provokes this strong aversion or fear, or gives us the creepy crawlies, and that we have such a like we want to avoid it at all costs kind of thing, right? And it's like that kind of stuff, like, well, I mean, whatever. These are the themes that are coming up for me, anyways. Of like where we can notice the force of Pluto coming in. And I think like that's the whole thing, is that like, if I think you can also look at it. I don't know. I'm not gonna make any predictions, anyways, around this stuff. Like, let's say like, I think Jeffrey Epstein, and the whole, pedophile ring is a good example of it, because basically there's something that we find disgusting, that we find morally reprehensible, that is basically taboo and kept secret. But, the whole point of this stuff wasn't just so that like rich, powerful people could get their kicks in perverted ways. It was like, it's like like, and if you go back to this thing about the Kant's formula of humanity, of using people as a means to an end, I mean, so you're like, that it's a good example of the whole thing about these pedophile rings, because it was like you're using human beings, completely disregarding their own integrity, their own freedom, their own well-being, and basically using them as tools to lure in people who are in powerful positions, and then you basically have some dirt on them, right? And so like it's like not only so you see Pluto here not only in the violation, but also in the kind of like this being a kind of dirty, disgusting, secret thing that is kept in the dark, but is there in order to have power over people, in which to manipulate people and have some kind of political power or political leverage and all this kind of thing. Obviously Pluto is not always the nicest kind of thing to talk about, but I thought it came up anyways based on some stuff going on, and some the effect anyways of the moon hitting Pluto this morning. I thought I'd get this video done while it was kind of being kind of fresh and brought up in the moment anyways.